work with such inadequate people. But that's also how we can see the fullness of his strength, the fullness of his grace. If we were never weak, how can we experience the strength that God provides?
Amen.
If we were never vulnerable, how can we experience his protection? If we were never sick, his healing. If we were never lonely, how can we experience his presence? If we were never grieved, how can we experience his comfort and his consolation? We are so weak. In this flesh, we're so frail. But our God is almighty. His strength is made so much more evident in our weakness. And this awesome promise brings Paul to a declaration finding pleasure in hardship. And it is indeed the hardest and most difficult thing to find pleasure in. And that's to find pleasure in our weakness and our times of great struggle. Most gladly, therefore, will I rather glory in my infirmities, in verse 9. Verse 10 says, therefore I take pleasure in infirmities, in reproaches, in necessities, in persecutions, in distresses for Christ's sake. Paul mentions infirmities here, and it's the same Greek word used in both verses. It means disease, an illness or sickness, so it's a physical weakness. Reproaches is where we get the word hubris from. The word in Greek is hubris. It's the same thing, basically. And this is the idea of adding insult to injury. So you're already injured, now somebody comes along and kicks you while you're down, or makes fun of you because you got hurt. Necessities are strong forces, outward pressures that can come into our lives. Persecutions. I don't think any of us have ever been persecuted yet. The word in the Greek is to chase or to pursue, to hunt down like an animal. And you've heard the accounts of first century Christians, how they're thrown in a gladiator arena and chased by wild animals and devoured and eaten by them, torn apart. Hebrews goes through it in the Hall of Faith. We've not been persecuted yet. But this is something that Paul is saying he takes pleasure in. Distresses means a confined place. So this shows our limitations. But it shows also that God's power is still limitless. And it can also mean, this word distress means anguish, or it's defined as an excruciating or an acute suffering or pain. But these are what Paul will now say he'll glory in. This is what Paul will take pleasure in now. It doesn't make sense. This is the hardest thing to come to grips with. That, Lord, when you bring adversity into my life, when you bring trials and tribulations into my life, when you bring testing, I will praise you for it. And I will glory in that. Because you're doing the work that I don't know yet what the outcome is. But you're doing the work that's best for me. When we begin to fully realize the power of God, then we will not shy away from these times of weakness. In fact, we, like Paul, can thrive in them. We can take pleasure when these times come, knowing that our God is fully capable to provide as much grace and as much strength as we need. He is unlimited in his grace and in his power. The question then lies in how much do we rely on him for it in our times of need. He's there, all powerful, with full of grace. Do we go to him? Or do we try to do it on our own? Do we try to do it in our own strength? Fight this in our own strength, in our own power? And then so often see that, wow, we really are so weak. There's no way we can do it by ourselves. We must rely on his power. Verse 9b, the last part of verse 9b, that the power of Christ may rest upon me. I think we need to be reminded of what the power of Christ can do. Matthew 4, verse 24. And his fame went through all Syria, and they brought unto him all sick people that were taken with diverse diseases and torments, and those which were possessed with devils, and those which were lunatic, and those that had the palsy, and he healed them. Matthew 11:5 says, the blind receive their sight, and the lame walk, the lepers cleansed, and the deaf hear. The dead are raised up, and the poor have the gospel preached to them. This is the power of Christ. The power of Christ can transform lives. It doesn't matter what your circumstances are. You can't walk, the power of Christ can make you walk. He did so in his word. It's the same power still available. He raised the dead. He gave us new life spiritually. We were dead in trespasses and sins, yet he raised us up. This is the power of Christ. And it's there available for you. Every time you go through something, every time you go through a difficult situation. John 16:33, these things have I spoken unto you, that ye might have peace. In the world ye shall have tribulation, but be of good cheer, I have overcome the world. We can see the power of Christ. It can do anything. It can work in the most miraculous ways, or it can simply provide the strength you need for you to endure the trials you may be going through. The word rest in 2 Corinthians 12:9 means to abide. And this power of Christ can be evident in your life as you go through difficult situations and circumstances. It can be seen of all as a